I came here today to say that NASA must meet that new spirit with new urgency and the focus that it all deserves. Just a few moments ago, Buzz Aldrin was reflecting on his time in the Apollo program. He talked about that fabled Apollo 11 mission. He said in 1962 we had an objective, we had time, but we didn't have a plan. In Space Policy Directive 1, the President directed NASA to create a lunar exploration plan. But as of today, more than 15 months later, we still don't have a plan in place, but Administrator Bridenstiner told me 5 minutes ago, we now have a plan to return to the moon. Truth is, despite the dedication of the men and women who are designing and building and testing the SLS, you all know the program's been plagued by bureaucratic inertia, by what some call the paralysis of analysis. The nation actually learned with great disappointment in recent weeks that the date for the first flight for the SLS has been pushed back yet again to 2021. You know, after years of cost overruns and slipped deadlines, we're actually being told that the earliest we can get back to the moon is 2028. Now, that would be 18 years after the SLS program was started, and 11 years after the President of the United States directed NASA to return American astronauts to the moon. Ladies and gentlemen, that's just not good enough. We're better than that. It took us 8 years to get to the moon the first time, 50 years ago, when we had never done it before. And it shouldn't take us 11 years to get back. You know, it's been 47 years since American astronauts last walked on the moon. And ironically, America's first generation of space pioneers knew that it would likely take time for the next generation to return to the moon, including one of the founders of Rocket City, Dr. Wernher von Braun. Just as it took the development of the airplane for the United States Navy to reach the South Pole 45 years after an expedition of Norwegian explorers made history and got there in 1911, Dr. von Braun believed it would take what he called, in his words, enabling technology for us to return to the lunar surface, and that it might take just as much time to develop it. The good news is, as we will hear from our distinguished panelists today, those enabling technologies have arrived, and we are going back to the moon. Because of your work, because of the ingenuity, dedication, and entrepreneurial spirit reflected in this room and throughout the American space enterprise, since the end of Apollo 11, we've forged incredible breakthroughs in our technology that have allowed us to go further, more safely in space than ever before. We have the technology to return to the moon and renew American leadership in human space exploration. What we need now is urgency. Now, make no mistake about it. We're in a space race today, just as we were in the 1960s. And the stakes are even higher. Last December, China became the first nation to land on the far side of the moon and revealed their ambition to seize the lunar strategic high ground and become the world's preeminent spacefaring nation. And for more than 7 years, without a viable human space launch program of our own, Russia has been charging the United States more than $80 million a seat every time an American astronaut travels to the International Space Station. But it's not just competition against our adversaries. We're also racing against our worst enemy, complacency. And the truth is, we've been here before. Nearly 62 years ago, the race for space began, and the Soviet Union took an early lead. But the sight of Sputnik blinking across the October sky spurred the American people to action. We refuse to accept a future in space written by the enemies of freedom. We vowed to claim our rightful place as the undisputed leader in the exploration of the heavens, and 12 years later, the one giant leap occurred. We achieved our goal of American leadership in space. Now, more than 50 years later, we gather here today to say that it's up to this generation to meet the challenge of our time. And with the recommendations of this National Space Council, the recommendations will be approved today. I believe that we are rising to meet that challenge head on.